I defended a janitor, got betrayed, lost everything, and then she did something I never expected. They say Los Angeles is a city of dreams, but for me, it was a city of reality, my reality. At 45, I had everything I ever wanted. My tech company in Silicon Valley was pulling in millions. I had a mansion overlooking the ocean in Malibu, and my fiancée, Kaylee, was a walking advertisement for luxury. Designer outfits, first-class vacations, an Instagram feed that could make any influencer jealous. She had it all. Or rather, I gave it all to her. Life was good. Maybe even too good. Weekends meant private yacht parties, networking with Hollywood elites, and sipping expensive whiskey while watching the sunset from my infinity pool. People call me a generous guy, the life of the party, the one who picked up the tab without hesitation. I liked that reputation. What was the point of having money if you weren't using it to enjoy life? My morning started with a personal trainer yelling at me to engage my core while I attempted not to spill my green juice all over my Lululemon shorts. After an hour of suffering, I'd grab a double espresso from a boutique coffee shop where the baristas knew my name but still spelled it wrong on my cup. From there, it was straight to my home office, where I pretended to work while actually scrolling stock reports and occasionally making a few calls to remind people I was still in charge. Afternoons? Those were for overpriced lunches at places where the portions were microscopic. But the bill could finance a used Honda. Kaylee loved those spots, especially if they had good lighting for her daily Instagram stories. "Babe, this sushi looks so aesthetic," she'd say, angling her phone just right while I stare at play what looked like 3 artfully arranged fish scraps. Despite the absurdity of it all, I enjoyed my life. Or at least, I thought I did. Evenings were a mix of high-stakes poker games with other tech executives who talked more about venture capital than actual poker, or dinner parties where I nodded along as people discussed real estate investments in Dubai like they were buying sneakers. Kaylee would be busy taking photos, ensuring every angle captured her effortless lifestyle. Meanwhile, I'd sip another drink and wonder if anyone actually enjoyed these conversations, or if we were all just pretending. Then Dave called. Dave and I went way back. Childhood friend from a small town in Ohio. The kind of friendship where you don't keep score. We survived high school, college, and our broke 20s together. While I skyrocketed to success in tech, Dave took a different path. He was smart, no doubt about it, but life had thrown him some bad hands. Job layoffs, a messy divorce, some bad investments. He'd moved to LA a few years ago, hoping for a fresh start, but it seemed like things hadn't quite turned around for him yet. "Mike, I hate asking you this, man, but I need a favor," he said over the phone, his voice hesitant. I was standing on my balcony, looking at the Pacific, a glass of Macallan in my hand. I already knew I'd say yes before he even asked. 50 grand. I just need to cover my mortgage for a few months. It's temporary, I swear. I'll pay you back. 50 grand wasn't small change, but let's be real, my monthly car expenses were more than that. And this was Dave, the guy who covered for me when I almost flunked statistics in college. The guy who let me crash on his couch when I first moved to California with nothing but a duffel bag and a head full of dreams. If there was anyone in the world I trusted, it was him. Kaylee, overhearing the conversation, gave me a look from across the room, the kind that silently asked, "Are you seriously giving away that much money?" She didn't say anything, though. Not yet. Dave sounded embarrassed even asking, which made it worse. I could picture him, probably sitting in some tiny rental, stressing over his finances, feeling like a failure for even making this call. "Of course, man. Don't worry about it. I didn't ask for a contract. No paperwork. No bank transfer receipts. Just an old-fashioned handshake and a promise." Kaylee sighed dramatically, but didn't press the issue. She knew I was stubborn when it came to helping people I cared about. I wired the money that same night, then poured myself another drink, feeling pretty damn good about helping out a friend. What's 50 grand between brothers? It was just another morning at the office, another day of pretending I was busier than I actually was. My assistant had already filtered out the emails that required my urgent attention, which mostly meant approving deals I had already decided on weeks ago. A few board members had sent messages about an upcoming meeting, but honestly, I was more interested in the fantasy football rankings than another discussion about stock options. Then I heard Ray's voices from down the hall. At first, I ignored it. People got stressed. That was normal in business. But the longer it went on, the clearer it became that this wasn't just some casual disagreement over spreadsheets. There was a sharpness to it, a tone I didn't like. So I got up and walked over. Tim, one of my senior managers, stood near the break room, arms crossed, his face flushed with irritation. In front of him, looking small and out of place, was Emily, the janitor. She wasn't just standing there. She was holding back tears. And I knew that look. That kind of sadness wasn't just about work. It was life piling on top of someone who was already drowning. I stepped closer, just in time to hear Tim's last remark. If you can't keep your personal life out of the workplace, maybe this job isn't for you. The words hit like a slap. Tim didn't even notice me standing there. But Emily did. She quickly wiped her face and turned away, like she was embarrassed to be caught crying. That did it. Tim, my office. Now. His face went pale. I didn't yell, didn't need to. There was a tone that came with being the guy who signed the paychecks, and I had perfected it. He nodded stiffly and walked toward my office without another word. Emily still wouldn't look at me. She kept her head down, pretending to wipe an already clean counter. Take a break. I told her, softer this time. Come see me when you're ready. A few minutes later, Tim sat stiffly in front of my desk, hands clasped like a kid who just got caught cheating on a test. I leaned back in my chair and let the silence stretch just long enough to make him uncomfortable. You want to tell me what that was about? Tim shifted, exhaled through his nose. She wasn't working. She was crying in the supply closet on company time. And, look, Mike, this is a business. If people can't keep their emotions in check. I cut him off. That woman cleans this office every day. You think that means she doesn't have real problems? That she doesn't deserve some basic human decency? He didn't answer. He knew better. I let the silence do the rest of the talking. If I ever hear about you treating someone like that again, you'll be cleaning out your desk. We clear? Tim nodded quickly. Yes, sir. Good. Now get out. After he left, I sat there for a second, drumming my fingers on the desk. I had dealt with guys like Tim my whole career. People who thought leadership was about power, not responsibility. And while firing him might have felt good, I had a feeling this would be a better lesson. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. Emily stood there, looking like she regretted showing up. Come in, I said, waving her inside. Sit down. She hesitated before perching on the edge of the chair like she wasn't sure she was supposed to be there. Up close, I noticed details I hadn't before. She wasn't just exhausted. She was worn thin, like someone who hadn't had a break in years. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I didn't mean to cause trouble. You didn't cause anything. Tim did. I leaned forward. You okay? That was all it took. She let out a breath like she'd been holding it in all day. And then, bit by bit, it all came out. Her husband had been a veteran, served overseas. He never made it back. That left her alone to raise their son, Nick, who was some kind of genius with computers but had no way to chase his dreams because their life had been one financial crisis after another. And the final punch? His laptop had broken, the one thing he needed to keep working on a startup he'd been pouring his soul into. I sat back, absorbing all of it. How much? I asked. Emily frowned. What? The laptop. How much would it cost to replace? She hesitated. It's an expensive model, around $1,500. I pulled open my desk drawer, grabbed my personal checkbook, and started writing. She stared at me like I had just started speaking another language. I can't take this. It's not a loan, I told her. It's a gift. She was shaking her head before I even finished. I can't accept that. I pushed the check across the desk. Yeah, you can. She swallowed hard, looking between me and the check like it was some kind of trick. Then, finally, she took it, her hands trembling. Thank you, she whispered. For a second, I saw something shift in her face. Gratitude, relief, something deeper than just money. And For a moment, I felt it too. A pull, something I couldn't quite name. But before it could settle, I pushed it aside. Because I had Kaylee. Because this was just a moment. Because Emily was just someone I was helping. That was all it was. Right? Success, I had learned, was a fragile thing. 1 minute, you're on top of the world, sipping champagne on a yacht. The next, you're drowning in lawsuits and watching your empire collapse like a badly built sandcastle. And the worst part? It wasn't bad luck. It wasn't market shifts. It was betrayal. It started with whispers, small rumors that I brushed off as nothing. A minor stock dip, a couple of bad deals, the kind of things that happen in business. But then, the losses kept stacking up. Clients started pulling out. Projects stalled. Investors grew skittish. Something was wrong, but I had no idea just how deep it ran. Then the bomb dropped. A major competitor, one that I had outpaced for years, somehow had access to all our latest developments. Proprietary data, internal strategies, client negotiations, everything. They used it to undercut my company at every turn, signing contracts before we could even get a bid in. By the time I realized what was happening, the damage was irreversible. It didn't take long for the SEC to come knocking. An internal audit revealed that someone on my team had been feeding confidential information to the competition for months. And when the truth came out, it hit harder than I could have ever imagined. It was Tim, the same Tim I had given a second chance. The same Tim who had sat in my office, sweating as I warned him about how to treat people with respect. Turns out, he had been working with my so-called best friend, Dave, the entire time. Dave, the guy I trusted like a brother. The guy I had loaned 50 grand to without hesitation. The guy who had played the long game, gaining my trust just so he could gut me from the inside. It was personal. They wanted revenge. Tim never got over what happened in the office, and Dave, he had always resented my success. I just never saw it. The whole thing had been planned out for months, maybe even longer. They had set me up to fail, and I walked right into it. The lawsuit drained me. Legal fees piled up, my company's stock plummeted, and suddenly, the board wanted answers I didn't have. When the courts ruled against me, it was over. I was slapped with massive penalties for negligence. And while I wasn't criminally charged, the financial blow was enough to wipe out everything I had built. Investors pulled their money. Clients jumped ship, and within weeks, my company was nothing but a cautionary tale in Forbes. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, Kaylee left. She didn't do it quietly, either. No, she made sure the whole world knew. One morning, I woke up to find my phone blowing up with notifications. When I checked, there it was, an Instagram post from Kaylee, perfectly edited, captioned with just enough venom to cut deep. Success is attractive. Failure? Not so much. Time to move on. Hashtag new beginnings, hashtag leveling up. She had already moved on. Some new guy with a private jet and a face so smooth he looked like he never blinked. My name trended for all the wrong reasons. Articles popped up dissecting my downfall. Podcasts speculated about where I went wrong. And social media had a field day. The bank took my house. My account were frozen. Creditors started calling. And the people I thought were my friends, they disappeared faster than my net worth. One by one, they stopped answering calls. The invitations stopped coming. It was like I had never existed. For the first time in my life, I was alone. Really alone. I tried to fight back, tried to make some smart investments to recover, but it was too late. Every deal I touched turned to dust. Desperation isn't a good business strategy. I made bad bets, trusted the wrong people, and lost what little I had left. I spent my days pretending I had a plan, but in reality, I had nothing. I rotated between cheap motels, overpriced short-term rentals, and the occasional couch of an old acquaintance who hadn't quite caught on to my downfall yet. Eating out meant drive-through dollar menus instead of steakhouse reservations. My car went from a custom Bentley to whatever rental I could afford that week. The doormen who used to greet me with a nod now barely glanced at me when I passed by my old spots. One day, I found myself standing outside a cafe, staring through the window at people who looked like they had never worried about anything more than their next latte order. I used to be them, I used to sit in places like this, talking about IPOs and market trends like I was untouchable. Now, now I was just another guy in a wrinkled suit, wondering how the hell everything had gone so wrong. If you had told me a year ago that I'd be living under a bridge, digging through trash cans for half-eaten sandwiches, I would have laughed in your face. Hard. Yet here I was. Reality hit differently when it was cold concrete under your back instead of Egyptian cotton sheets. The first few nights, I still had some pride. I told myself it was temporary, just a rough patch. But rough patches don't usually last this long. And pride? It doesn't keep you warm at night. Downtown LA was a different city when you had nowhere to go. The same streets where I used to valet my car at overpriced restaurants were now littered with tents and people just like me. People who had once been something but lost everything. I used to walk past them without a second thought. Now I was one of them. I learned fast. The trick was knowing which dumpsters had decent leftovers. The bakery on 3rd tossed out bagels that were still edible if you got to them early enough. A taco stand near Wilshire sometimes dumped extra tortillas if they made too many. You didn't get picky out here. You ate what you found, and you were grateful for it. The worst part? The way people looked at me. Or rather, the way they didn't. I had spent years being the guy people wanted to know, the one who got nods of approval when he walked into a room. Now I was invisible. Just another piece of the city no one wanted to acknowledge. One night, hunger won. My pride was long gone, and I had nothing left to lose. I decided to find Dave. I told myself he wouldn't turn me away. Yeah, he had stabbed me in the back, but we had history. We were kids together. He owed me that much, at least. When I finally made it to his house, his big, beautiful house that looked an awful lot like the one I used to own, I hesitated. For a moment, I saw the reflection of myself in his glass door. Dirty clothes, unshaven face, a guy who looked like he had lost every fight life threw at him. I almost walked away. I should have. Dave opened the door, and for a second, I thought I saw something like regret flash across his face. Then just as quickly, it was gone. He didn't invite me in, didn't even step outside. He just stood there, arms crossed, looking at me like I was a problem he had hoped never to deal with again. I told him I just needed a little help, a place to sleep, a meal, a way to start over. He laughed, actually laughed. Then he leaned in and lowered his voice just enough to twist a knife deeper. You show up here again, and I'll have you arrested for trespassing. And if you keep running your mouth about me, I'll see you in court for defamation. Then he shut the door. I stood there for a while. I don't know how long. Long enough to realize that Dave had never really been my friend. I had just been useful to him. Until I wasn't. It started raining. Because of course it did. A few hours later, the cops found me curled up near an old parking lot. Someone had called them. Probably a business owner who didn't want me scaring away customers. They weren't rough, but they weren't friendly either. They ran my name, saw I had no warrants, and told me to move along. Move along to where? That was the real question. I ended up back under the bridge, soaked and shivering, watching the world move on without me. Then, out of nowhere, a voice called my name. Mike, that you? I turned, expecting another cop, or maybe some guy I had ticked off back in the day. But it wasn't. It was Tom. I hadn't seen Tom since college. Back then, he had been the guy we always made fun of, the one who chose stability over ambition, the one who didn't chase the big money or the fancy titles. I lost track of him years ago, but there he was, standing in front of me, looking like someone who would figure out life while I had completely wrecked mine. He didn't say much. He didn't ask what happened or why I looked like I had crawled out of a gutter. He just reached into his pocket, pulled out a few bills, and handed them to me. Get yourself something to eat. I hesitated, not because I didn't need it, but because for the first time in my life, I was on the other side of the equation. I had spent years throwing money around like it meant nothing. Now, a few crumpled bills in my hand felt like the most generous thing anyone had ever done for me. Tom smiled, a small, knowing smile. You were always a good guy, Mike. You just got lost for a while. And just like that, he walked away. I stared at the money in my hand, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time, shame, gratitude, hope, maybe a little of all three. I wasn't sure what came next, but for the first time in months, I felt like I had a reason to figure it out. A year on the streets changes you. It strips you down layer by layer until all that's left is a raw, unfiltered version of yourself. The part you spent a lifetime covering up with success, money, and carefully curated appearances. I wasn't Michael Crow, the wealthy entrepreneur, anymore. I was just another guy trying to make it through the day, without starving. It was late afternoon when I found myself behind a diner, rummaging through the trash for something that wasn't completely disgusting. That's when I heard a voice familiar, but so out of place in my world now that it took me a second to register. Michael? I froze. Slowly I turned. Standing there, grocery bag in hand, was Emily. Of all the people who could have found me like this, why did it have to be her? Her eyes widened, taking in the mess that was me. I probably smelled like a mix of sweat, city grime, and regret. My clothes, if you could still call them that, were more holes in fabric. But she didn't step back in disgust. She didn't pretend not to see me, like everyone else did. She sighed, shaking her head. Come on. I blinked. What? She gestured toward the street. You're coming with me. I almost laughed. Almost. Emily, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. She adjusted the bags in her arms. But I am. I should have argued. Told her I was fine. That I didn't need saving. But I was tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of pretending. And for the first time in a long time, someone was offering me kindness without expecting anything in return. So I followed her. Emily's apartment was small, but warm. Clean. Lived in. It smelled like coffee and something freshly baked. It was a kind of place that felt like a home, even if it wasn't fancy. Something I hadn't had in a long time. A teenage boy looked up from a laptop at the kitchen table as we walked in. He was tall and lanky, with sharp features that looked familiar. It took me a second to place him. Nick. He stared at me for a beat before realization hit. Then, to my surprise, he grinned. Whoa, you're Michael Crow. I scratched the back of my neck. Used to be. He shut his laptop and stood, extending a hand. You gave me the laptop. I shook his hand, feeling a little off balance. Yeah, that was a while ago. He nodded, excitement bubbling beneath the surface. That laptop changed everything. He turned the screen toward me, showing off lines of code I didn't understand. I built an app. It's still small, but it's actually making money now. I blinked. Wait, you're making money? Nick shrugged, like it wasn't a big deal. A couple thousand a month. Nothing huge. Yet, a couple thousand a month? When I was his age, I was flipping burgers for minimum wage. Emily chuckled as she set the groceries down. He's underselling it. He's got investors interested. Nick rolled his eyes. Mom. I sat down, still processing. I had given away that laptop on a whim, thinking it was just a small way to help. I never expected it to actually change someone's life. Emily handed me a plate of food before I could say anything else. It was just pasta, but to me, it was better than any 5-star meal I'd ever had. Real food, cooked in a real home. We ate, and for the first time in forever, I wasn't just another invisible man on the streets. I was part of something, even if it was just for a night. At some point, Emily set her fork down and looked at me. So, are you going to tell me what happened? I hesitated, not because I didn't want to tell her, but because I didn't know where to start. The arrogance, the bad choices, the betrayals. There was no clean way to explain how I had gone from a mansion in Malibu to digging through garbage behind a diner. But somehow it all came out. Emily listened. She didn't interrupt, didn't judge, just let me talk. When I finally stopped, she nodded. You were always a good guy, Michael. You just got lost for a while. Something about those words hit harder than anything I had told myself. Because she meant it. Because, despite everything, she still saw something in me worth saving. But I wasn't sure I deserved it. I wasn't sure I ever would. Staying at Emily's place felt strange at first. Not because it wasn't comfortable. It was the most warmth I'd had in over a year. But because I wasn't sure if I deserved it. A couch, clean clothes, a shower that didn't come from a gas station sink. Simple things that used to mean nothing now felt like luxuries. I told myself I'd leave after a day or two, that I didn't want to overstay my welcome. But Emily wasn't having it. "Stay as long as you need," she said. "You spent enough time outside." So I stayed. The first few days were mostly me relearning how to be human. I shaved. I got a haircut at a barbershop, where the guys side-eyed me until Emily vouched for me. I started wearing clothes that weren't stiff with dirt. And I ate real meals, not whatever I could scrounge up. The strangest part? Talking. At night, after Nick went to bed, Emily and I would sit in the kitchen with mugs of tea. She drank chamomile. I stuck to coffee. We'd talk about everything. Life, mistakes, regrets. She told me about how hard it was after losing her husband, how she had struggled to raise Nick alone. I told her how blind I had been to everything that actually mattered in life. One night, I admitted it outright. I used to think money solved everything. Emily smirked. And now I think I was a complete idiot. She didn't argue, just gave me a knowing smile. We all get a chance to change. Nick spent most of his time buried in his laptop, hammering away at his code, but every now and then, he'd glance over at me like he was still trying to figure me out. I could tell he was warming up to me, but he wasn't there yet. Then came the night that changed everything. I had gone out to grab some groceries for Emily, just some milk and eggs. Nothing special. On my way back, I heard shouting from a nearby alley. It wasn't the kind of shouting you ignored. I turned the corner and saw Nick, cornered by two guys, both bigger than him, both looking way too interested in his backpack. One of them reached for it. "Just give it up, man." Nick held on to it like his life depended on it. "No." The second guy rolled his eyes. "It's just a laptop, dude." That was enough. I stepped forward, keeping my voice steady. "Yeah, and it's not yours." They turned, looking me up and down, deciding if I was worth the trouble. I had nothing to lose. They could sense that. For a long second, no one moved. Then, just like that, they decided it wasn't worth it. They muttered something under their breath and walked off, disappearing into the night. Nick exhaled sharply, shoulders dropping. I had it under control. "Sure," I said. "Totally." We walked back in silence, but something had shifted. When we got inside, Nick set his laptop on the table and, for the first time, really looked at me. "Thanks." I just nodded, but I felt it. The change. The moment I went from random guys staying on the couch to something more. Emily fussed over Nick like any mom would, but after she was sure he was okay, she turned to me. "So you're a bodyguard now?" I shrugged. I prefer a street-level security consultant. That got a laugh out of her. A real one. Later that night, she tried to teach me how to cook. It was a disaster. I burned the eggs, somehow made spaghetti sauce too salty and too bland at the same time, and almost set a dish towel on fire. Nick watched from the table, shaking his head. Emily sighed dramatically. "Michael, you're hopeless." I threw up my hands. I was rich, okay? I had people for this. Nick smirked. "Yeah, well, welcome to the real world." Emily rolled her eyes and handed me a cutting board. "Chop these. Try not to ruin them." For the first time in a long time, I laughed. Really laughed. After dinner, I sat with Nick as he showed me his latest updates on the app. It wasn't just some hobby project. It was a fully functional platform, sleek and impressive. He had users. Investors were interested. The kid was onto something big, and he didn't even seem fazed by it. "You built all this?" I asked, scrolling through the interface. Nick nodded. "Yeah, and I don't just mean coding. I pitch investors. I studied market trends. I learned business strategy." I raised an eyebrow. "Where'd you learn all that?" Nick smirked. "Your old interviews." I blinked. "What?" He shrugged. "You used to be a big deal, man. I watched your talks, read your articles. You had some smart stuff to say. Shame you never followed your own advice." I let out a breath. He wasn't wrong. Nick leaned back, stretching. "Look, I know you're still figuring stuff out, but I could use someone who actually knows how to scale a business. You interested? I frowned. You want my help? Nick shrugged. I mean, unless you have a better offer. I didn't. Not even close. Emily smiled from the doorway, watching the exchange. Told you, she said. We all get a chance to change. And just like that, for the first time in years, life didn't feel so impossible. Nick's app wasn't just another social platform or some gimmicky startup trying to cash in on trends. It had real value. The software helped small businesses streamline their sales, track inventory, and manage customer relationships without the hefty price tag of enterprise-level solutions. Simple, effective, and exactly what struggling entrepreneurs needed. I spent years building businesses, but I never actually built something that made a difference for the little guys. Nick had, and he didn't even seem to realize how big it could be. TechCrunch disrupt, he said one evening, barely looking up from his screen. There's a pitch competition in San Francisco. Investors, media, the works. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. And you're planning to just walk in there, wing it, and hope for the best? Nick finally looked up. That was the idea. I shook my head. No chance. If you're going to pitch at TechCrunch, you need to be prepared. You're not just selling an app. You're selling yourself, your vision. Investors don't throw money at code. They throw it at people they believe in. That got his attention. For the next few weeks, our days were a blur of planning, refining, and running through mock presentations in the tiny apartment. Nick was brilliant, no doubt about it, but he was rough around the edges. His slides were cluttered. His delivery was robotic. He talked too much about the tech and not enough about the impact. People invest in solutions, not specs. I told him, you could have the best algorithm in the world, but if no one understands why it matters, it's worthless. Nick grumbled but took the advice. Slowly, he started improving. He got better at telling the story. How his app could help struggling business owners. How it wasn't just about making money, but about making people's lives easier. One night, after another round of pitch practice, Emily leaned against the kitchen doorway, watching us. You know, she said with a small smile, Nick looks up to you. I glanced over at him, still buried in his work. Yeah, well, he's got a good head on his shoulders. She stepped closer. It's more than that, Michael. You've given him something he didn't have before. I frowned. What's that? Emily's expression softened. Belief. You make him believe he can do this. You're like a father figure to him. Something in my chest tightened. I had spent so long believing I was nothing more than my mistakes. But now, for the first time, it felt like my past had led me to something that actually mattered. Finding a steady job wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. And for the first time in years, I actually felt like I was building something real. The owner of a small auto shop in Santa Monica took a chance on me, probably because I looked like I needed one. Fixing cars wasn't what I had ever pictured myself doing, but there was something satisfying about it. Solving a problem, making something run again. I liked it more than I expected. Emily took a job as the shop's administrator, handling scheduling, customer calls, and making sure the guys in the back actually did their jobs. She was a natural, organized firm, and somehow managed to charm even the grumpiest of customers. The shop ran better with her around, and I had a feeling the owner knew it too. Evenings were the best part of my day. After work, Emily and I would walk along the beach, letting the ocean drown out the noise of the city. It became our routine, cheap coffee in hand, feet sinking into the sand, talking about everything and nothing at all. One night, the sky darkened faster than usual, and before we knew it, the first drops of rain started falling. Most people ran for cover. We didn't. Instead, we just kept walking, the cool rain soaking through our clothes. Somewhere between the laughter and the downpour, I realized something. I didn't want to keep waiting for life to be perfect before I started living it. So I stopped walking, turned to Emily, and before I could talk myself out of it, I dropped to one knee right there in the rain. She froze. Michael, where are you? I don't have a ring. I don't have a plan. But I do know one thing. I don't want to spend another day without you. Her eyes widened, rain streaming down her face. For a second, I thought I had just made the dumbest move of my life. Then she laughed, The kind of laugh that made everything else fade away. You really are terrible at planning things, she said, shaking her head. But she nodded, and that was all I needed. We kissed right there in the rain, soaked, shivering, but completely, ridiculously happy. Back home, Nick didn't even act surprised when we told him. He just smirked and shrugged. About time, he said. You're basically already my second dad anyway. That hit me harder than I expected. Not in a bad way, just in a way that made me realize how much things had changed. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving, I was living. But life had a way of reminding me that the past wasn't done with me yet. Nick got the email a week later. TechCrunch wants me to present, he announced, holding up his phone like it was some kind of golden ticket. They want me in San Francisco next month. Emily hugged him, excitement lighting up her face. Nick, that's incredible. I felt it too. This was big. This was the kind of opportunity that could change everything. TechCrunch Disrupt was unlike anything I'd ever experienced before, and that was saying something. I had been to high-profile business events, sat in on billion-dollar meetings, but this was electric. Young founders pacing back and forth, perfecting their pitches. Investors whispering, trying to spot the next big thing. Cameras flashing. It was the kind of place where futures were made in minutes. Nick had prepared for this moment, like his life depended on it. And honestly, it kind of did. He wasn't just pitching an app. He was pitching himself, his vision, his ability to take this thing and turn it into something massive. We stood backstage, watching other startups present. Some were great, some not so much. I could see the nerves creeping in. His fingers drummed against his jeans, his foot tapped nonstop. I nudged him. Breathe. He let out a shaky exhale. Yeah, breathing. Got it. Then they called his name. Nick walked out onto that stage, laptop in hand, and delivered the best pitch I'd ever seen. He was clear, confident, and by the time he showed the demo, you could feel the energy shift in the room. The judges were hooked. Investors leaned forward. The Q&A was tough, but Nick handled every question like he had been doing this for years. When he finished, there was silence, a beat, then applause, loud, excited, real. I didn't even have to wait for the results. I knew he had done it. By the end of the night, Nick had multiple offers, but one stood out, a firm offering $5 million to acquire the app, plus equity in the company going forward. He wasn't just selling it off. He was becoming a real player in the industry. Emily hugged him so hard, I thought she might break a rib. I clapped him on the back, grinning like an idiot. Not bad, kid. A week later, we were holding the keys to a house in the suburbs. Not a mansion, not some extravagant estate, but a home. Something solid. Something ours. Nick got his own space, a sleek new apartment downtown, close to his new office. He had a real team now, real resources. Watching him step into this new world, knowing I had played a part in getting him there, felt better than any $1 million deal I had ever closed. But I wasn't done. With part of the money, I started my own company again, this time the right way. No ego, no cutting corners, just a solid foundation built on everything I had learned. Emily was my partner, Nick helped with tech, and for the first time, business felt personal in the best possible way. Then came the wedding. We kept it simple, just close friends and family on the beach at sunset. No extravagant guest list, no over-the-top decorations. Just us, the ocean, and vows that actually meant something. As we stood there, the waves crashing behind us, Emily took my hands and smiled. We did it, she whispered. And we had. Months passed, and life settled into something I had never known before. Peace. Real, genuine peace. No chasing, no proving anything to anyone. Just good work, good people, and a future I actually wanted. One evening, I sat on the porch, watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink. Nick was inside, sketching out ideas for his next big venture. Emily, glowing in a way that made my heart ache in the best way, sat beside me, resting a hand on her stomach. A baby. Our baby. I had spent so much of my life thinking wealth was about numbers, but as I sat there, surrounded by the people who mattered most, I realized the truth. I said mostly to myself, this is a real American dream.